Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Had an interesting thought about the price of silver while I was reading the news today, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, this is a bit of a circuitous one, and it has to do with the Russian oil embargo that's ongoing, the G7 price cap, all the disruptions to global energy markets, and then it also has to do with India and the demand for physical silver. So stick with me on this one. Like I said, it's a little bit circuitous, but I thought it was an interesting enough idea to share. This article is discussing how India is now receiving a steep discount on Russian oil that it is purchasing. And really, they're one of the main beneficiaries of these sanctions and of this disruption to the global energy market because basically what's going on here is India says, yeah, we'll still buy your oil, Russia, but you're going to need to sweeten the pot in order for us to do that. And we're going to need to get a good deal. And they are. And this article goes into how in October, India was paying about a $5 to $8 per barrel discount to the Brent crude price for the Russian oil that they're buying, or the Urals oil as it is known. And then in November, that discount rose to $10 to $11 a barrel. And now in December, it has risen as high as $12 to $15 a barrel. And this discount to Brent oil, so Brent is an oil benchmark. Brent represents North Sea oil. It's the pricing mechanism for about 2/3 of internationally traded oil. And then Urals, another benchmark, that is representative of Russian oil sales. And so basically what's going on here is India is paying less for their oil imports than the vast majority of the rest of the world. Now, what does that have to do with silver? Well, cheap oil is one of the things that you need. It's really the primary thing, at least in the 20th century. It was proven to be one of the big things you need to grow your economy. One of the reasons that the US economy was able to grow the way it did following World War II was the fact that we secured access to inexpensive Middle Eastern oil. And the US GDP more than quadrupled between 1945 and 1970, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had cheap petroleum. So India is probably going to see some significant economic growth if this disruption to the global energy economy persists. And I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any signs of it diminishing anytime soon, or any resumption of normalcy of the globalization that we have lost. And so I think India is going to keep getting this cheap Russian oil for some time to come. And if we take a look at this chart of the top 10 countries by GDP, you can see India is in the number 5 position there. So they have a very large economy, a very significant economy, about $2.6 trillion worth of GDP. But you can also notice another thing here. They have a very low per capita GDP because they do have a big economy, but they have an even bigger population. And their per capita GDP here is much, much lower than any other country in the top 10 here. It's about $1,980. And you compare that to the second lowest per capita GDP in the top 10 here, China, with about $8,600 per capita GDP, and you can see they have a lot of catching up to do. And their per capita GDP in India is so low that in order to find another country on this list that has a lower one, you've got to go all the way down to number 30 to Nigeria. So that's another very populous country. The thing here is, what I want to point out is that India has a lot of room for economic growth. You know, for them to, let's say, double their GDP, they'd have to increase their GDP by $2.6 trillion, but that's not that crazy of a feat. I mean, it would put them into the number 3 position on this chart from the number 5 position, but still, they would have by far the lowest per capita GDP on the list. And, you know, think about maybe the idea of China doubling their GDP. That's a much more difficult feat than India doing it. And India kind of has what it needs now to put on some significant economic growth, and that is cheap energy. Now, why does any of this matter for silver? You know, why am I going on about oil and India and their GDP? Well, this is a headline from Bloomberg from early November about how surging Indian demand for silver is responsible for the drawdown in Western warehouse levels of physical metal. Now, India has a long tradition of storing wealth in precious metals, both gold and silver, but they're one of the biggest importers of silver in the world. And in 2022, their demand for silver has surged by 80% to a record level. It's not just jewelry or industrial demand, it's about a quarter industrial demand, actually, their imports, but the rest goes to jewelry, silver bullion like bars and coins, and then also flatware. There's a tremendous demand for all of these things in India. Now, what's going to happen if the Indian economy grows dramatically? Well, people in India are going to have more money, and that means there's going to be more demand for physical silver. They don't really trust fiat paper currencies over there. They don't have the tradition of that. I mean, they haven't benefited from having the world reserve currency, so they don't have something like the dollar. The rupee is not as recognized or trusted as a store of value. And again, they have this long cultural tradition of storing value in precious metals. And why will this development be so beneficial specifically for physical metal? Well, Indian farmers are not buying ETFs. They're buying the real thing. That is why this high demand for silver in India is draining warehouses like the LBMA and the COMEX in the West. It's part of why we're seeing this big drawdown in inventory levels that we have seen over the past year. And I suspect that should India manage to secure this supply of cheap energy for the long term, they're going to see significant economic growth, and that means there's going to be more money floating around in the Indian economy, and the average person there is going to have more money that they're looking to save. And I think we know how they're going to save that. A lot of it is going to be saved in the form of precious metals. So insofar as India is able to grow their economy and maintain access to this cheap energy, it is a very bullish factor, I think, moving forward for silver. And I mean, of all the countries on that list, the top 10 GDPs in the world, India is the one really that growth will stimulate a lot of demand for precious metals specifically, because there's over 1 billion people there and they all want to get their hands on some of this stuff. So just another reason that I am glad to be storing value in physical precious metals myself. Not financial advice, but with everything that's going on in the world, there is a transition to hard, physical, tangible assets like gold and silver. We've seen China importing a lot of gold lately. They recently announced a addition to their official gold holdings. We're seeing folks in India stacking silver and also gold, and it's only a matter of time before other populations around the world start stacking silver as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think that this is way too circuitous a connection, or do you think there's something actually possibly to the connection between cheap energy for India and the price of gold and silver? I always like to hear what you have to say, so leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.